friends, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to finish our video series on bad faith. If you like what you're seeing so far, support the channel. Alright, let's get started. So, the last two videos, we're looking at kind of well-known examples that popped up for me of what bad faith is. So this video is really intended to be more of an explanation of what that term actually means, and to look at a couple of examples of really like off-the-cuff racist behavior that I've seen, tossed around Facebook, things like that. And we're going to look at the ways that this stuff is disingenuous and relies on these bad faith arguments. And, the person's kind of hiding their real intentions, their real feelings, and making really disingenuous arguments to cover for it. This is really like a central issue in our country right now. I mean, if you go on a liberal news channel and a conservative news channel, and then go read maybe like a leftist magazine, all three of them are going to tell you a completely different version of reality. And not all three can be correct at the same time. The people who are saying racism isn't real, and the people who are having racism done against them, those two people are not correct at the same time, right? And so it's a really simple process. If you'll just admit to yourself that a lot of people are lying, more than you'll be comfortable with. They're not just speaking some subjective version of reality for them. They're knowingly being disingenuous. And the more you help yourself come to terms with the fact that a lot of the people you know are unhinged liars, it's going to help. It really will, I promise. Because you're going to be able to start seeing when people are acting in bad faith, when they're trolling you, when they're making nonsense arguments, mocking you, hiding their real intentions, etc. Without this toolkit, I promise you, you don't have a fucking clue what people are on about most of the time. You're going to constantly be beset by bad arguments that don't actually make any sense at the end of the day. Right? So this is all a process of trying to learn when people are totally full of shit. So let's get into this. This was a video that was getting tossed around social media the last couple of days.
Well, Black privilege is thinking that you are deserved or entitled to something because of the color of your skin.
That's white people. Just so we're all clear. Right? This is one of those moments like, in the Kyle video or the Candace video where they contradict themselves in a single sentence. She's defining a thing for you, but the opposite is the reality. And she's a living embodiment of the principle that she's decrying right now.
Black people especially, do get special scholarships. They're also shielded from a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, again, she's just literally projecting. Like, she knows full well that white people get special privileges in the society, and they always have. She knows full well that most colleges were white, that black people couldn't go to the same colleges that white people could go to. So this is just disingenuous lies, folks. She's taking what white privilege is, and everyone knows what white privilege is by now, and she's just replacing the word white with black and making a disingenuous argument based on that. She's trying to highlight the hypocrisy of black people by using the same arguments we make against white people who are privileged and don't care. But it doesn't work. It falls flat immediately the second you see the premise.
Because of the color of their skin. Nobody wants to be tagged as racist. I'm not racist. I have respect for all skin colors.
Stop.
Asian, Hispanic, Black, whatever. I would never treat any patient differently. I would never treat any human being differently. I think God loves everyone. I'm on the same page. However,
stop.
I don't think that any race is above scrutiny, including Black people. I think that the way people are behaving and the things that are being said are unreal. I don't have words for them. That being said, what do you feel like you go out and do where you're like, oh, I'm Black. Oh, I'm Black. I'm feeling it today. I don't understand. And yes, George Floyd actually was resisting arrest. He started to have a freak out.
Okay. I'm not going to go over this again. If you need a thorough rebuttal on why someone resisting arrest is not a death sentence, you can watch the Candace video. I addressed that there. What the fuck she was even talking about by Black people go out and say, I feel real Black today? What the fuck does that even mean? That's the weirdest shit I've ever heard. Like, genuinely. That's not how anybody thinks about anything. That's a sign to me that she's probably never had a conversation with an actual in-person Black person. I mean, like, what does that even mean? I left the house and I felt real Black today? No, actually quite the opposite. There is a shocking moment for most Black children when they realize they're Black, and it's usually the first moment they're targeted by racial violence. That's real shit. I mean, the first time I noticed that I was white was because I was called in lover for hanging out with a Black kid when I was like 8. So that was the first moment that I had any idea that race was real, was because a fucking racist made it real for me. Right? And that's the same way with Black people. If race was really not a problem, it would be not a problem. Black people don't walk out of the house saying, I feel real Black today, I'm going to make racism a thing. No, man. It's a psychic web of violence and imposition of identity that's mostly done in the white community to Black people. Now, there is a little bit of racial reinforcement amongst minorities and even inside of a single minority. So Black people might weaponize racism against other Black people in rare circumstances. It does happen. But for the most part, the imposition of this so-called Blackness, that's a product of a Jim Crow society. That's a product of a slave society. It's the imposition of the class structure on the individual. Black people aren't born subservient. The society makes them that way through racial ideation, right? And this is the same ideation that she's continuing right now. I mean, this is literally, she's saying, I'm not racist, but I believe the root of racism to be true and valid, and I'm going to repeat it. I mean, come the fuck on.
Panic attack when they went to put him in the car, probably because he was high on meth, fentanyl, and positive for COVID. You should know as a nurse that like COVID is like when you go into severe respiratory distress. He probably had like an MI when he was down on the ground. Was the police officer's foot in the wrong spot?
I think the more frightening thing to me is that this is a nurse who just said that COVID is a respiratory syndrome, whatever. It's a virus. It affects your lungs, it affects your brain, it affects your whole body's ability to create and metabolize energy. It'll box your kidneys. It can create permanent and irreversible nerve damage. It's much, much more than a cough, right? And that tells me that this is a person who's probably been Q-pilled. We're not going to talk about Q today, but I bet you she's been listening to the right-wing conspiracies that have been telling people that the coronavirus is not real. It's just a cough. And that means that there are people in our healthcare industry who are batshit bananas and believe conspiracy theories over medical science. That is fucking terrifying. But again, we're not going to address that today. Time is nigh.
Maybe, but meth and fentanyl and positive COVID are probably more leading factors to an MI. So do your research.
Well, yeah, but he didn't stop breathing randomly walking down the street, even though he was high on meth and fentanyl and had COVID. So the actual thing that killed him was the people standing on his chest. So do your research.
Anyway, that being said, there are many cases where in Central Park, black people killed a white teen and nobody cared. Nobody did a thing.
Is she talking about the Central Park 5 right now?
To your color and your...
Is this a fucking parody? Is she talking about the Central Park 5 right now? The innocent kid? She has to be talking about something else. She couldn't possibly. She couldn't possibly. That's too dumb even for a dumb person. Well, first of all, let me say, if we're going to keep track, white people are way up on hate crimes. 2 people were lynched per day in this country immediately after the Civil War. It slowed down to 1 every 2 days through the late 1800s and early 1900s, and down to about 1 a week right before World War II. So if you keep track, that's less than 80 years ago. And then going back for about 80 years, we were lynching black people from trees every couple of days in this country. So, I mean, if we're keeping track, white people are way up. Now, I don't think that's the way to do it, but I'm just saying have a little perspective here.
Gender, whatever you want to say. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Oh, do kids get bullied at school? Yeah, it's wrong, but does it happen? Yeah. So I'm saying, oh, do kids...
I'm guessing by her mocking, condescending tone, she's not real worried about bullying. Just a guess.
Get bullied at school? Yeah, it's wrong, but does it happen?
I'm also
yeah.
guessing
So
she may be
you
a
toughen
bully.
up and you grow up.
Guess.
Like, stop blaming it on the bully. Like, become your own person.
I hear this shit all the time. And does it never occur to these fucking people that they could grow up and stop blaming black people for their shortcomings? Where's the fucking consistency, folks? This is why when you see someone say hypocritical shit, like they say something in one circumstance and they won't say it in another circumstance, that's bad faith. That's your illustrator that they're lying. One of those things is not true, right? This is not a person who cares about bullying and mocks people for being concerned about bullying, right? So very clearly one of those two things are lies. And oftentimes your actions are more important. They're more revealing. So the fact that she's taking the time to behave in a mocking way towards people who are concerned about bullying probably means she's not that concerned about bullying. She's taken the time to make a video about how black people need to grow up and stop blaming white people. She's not going to take the time to realize that she can stop blaming black people. You see what I mean? It's always hypocritical. It's always self-serving. It's always othering. That's the mindset, folks. That's bad faith. Bad faith and racism go hand in hand because truth and racism don't talk. They are not friends. They want nothing to do with each other. Truth and racism don't go to the same dinner parties.
Rise above it. Doesn't mean that things, need to be changed so differently.
So rise above it. Don't blame the system. Same shit Candace was saying. And you can see why people mock Candace and say she's anti-black because functionally what she says is indistinguishable from what this obviously racist white lady says.
Some things will always be. I have never been a part of slavery. I don't know.
You literally just said you don't want to change the system. That system is the system that slavery built. Therefore, you benefit from it, and you know it. Stop lying. These fucking people play, man.
Know anything about that? I'm not raising children who know anything about that. You don't know anything about that. So let's not pretend that our history, or that history, not even ours, because we're taking stuff out of history, right? Teddy Roosevelt. So let's not pretend like that has any.
If you want to talk about taking stuff out of history, let's talk about why all my neighbors are white and the town we live in is a native word. Where'd they go? What happened to their history?
Reflection on today's society, because I feel like black privilege is bringing that up and throwing it in white people's face so that they can get what they want and get respect.
Okay, again, you can see her real feelings when you replace the word black with white, right? Let's go back.
Black privilege is bringing that up and throwing it in white people's face so that they can get what they want and get.
White privilege is bringing racism up just to throw it in black people's face so white people can get what they want. I mean, that's a pretty good definition, if I say so myself. So she hit the nail on the head. She just didn't know she was the nail she was hitting on the head.
Respect and whatever else, and call us racist, but racism is dead.
There you go, folks. Racism is dead. This white lady from fucking Fort Wayne told you racism is dead. Candace Owens told you racism is dead, so you better believe it. Who are you going to believe, them or your lying eyes who see black people getting lynched again? Who are you going to believe? So, I'm done with this. We're going to close this. And now let's look at some other racist monstrosities. This is from a middle-aged woman on Facebook in my area, trying to understand racism. I've often wondered why whites are racist and no other race is. Well, that's not true. But in this country, the predominant form of racism is the form of racism that led white people to bring immigrants here and abuse them. Whether through slavery, or whether through harsh conditions through legal immigration, or whether through exploitation and human trafficking in illegal immigration. We have exploited all three for profit, and we don't care about the results. That was white people. Mexicans weren't running slaves into America. So, you know, if you want to have a serious conversation, you got to be a serious person. You got to be serious about looking at the context. This is a person who's going to remove the context and pretend like their arguments make sense when everyone knows that this doesn't make sense. There are African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, Arab Americans, etc. And then there are just Americans. So you said it yourself. This is a white supremacist society. It defaults America with whiteness. That's the illustration of the problem right there. So like, talk about saying you don't understand it and then literally being able to lay it out. You're just pretending that you don't understand it. You don't want to understand it. You can call me white boy cracker honky, whitey caveman, that's okay. Well, that's because acts of individual prejudice is not the same thing as structural racism. The thing people are upset about structural racism. Black people really, by and large, are not worried about white people saying mean things to them as long as no violence happens and as long as people stay out of their way. But unfortunately, violence keeps happening and our society stays in their way intentionally to keep them second-class citizens in capitalism. So, again, you know, she even says, you say that whites commit a lot of violence against you. So why are the ghettos the most dangerous places to live? Okay, but you're going to say that and not admit why there's ghettos. Not admit that black people are systematically relocated there. By the 20s, almost every black person lived in ghettos. And through systems like redlining and tax code manipulation and defunding schools in inner cities, the cycle of poverty and hopelessness in these ghettos has been enforced, which is by design. And it's a design that you, as an outsider, benefit from. That's why you see the disparities, because it's quite literally two different worlds inside of the same country. You see the world that happens when people are allowed to flourish, the white community, and you see the world where people are systematically victimized, the black community. That's why it's more dangerous to live there, because racism exists. United Negro College Fund, I mean, white people have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, so I don't want to hear it. The reason those funds existed because banks wouldn't loan to black people. That's why that happened. So again, it exists because of racism. So you can see, again, the systematic mindset of blaming black people for racism, as if they wake up every day and conjure this system. Now she's going to go through, and so you have black people, Mexicans, Jews, Arabs. So she's laying out for you all the groups that she's prejudiced against, and like, why do they get holiday? Well, because it's celebrating their culture, and you already have plenty of holidays. Christmas celebrates a fake white Jesus. Independence Day celebrates the day that white landowners got free from the British and kept everybody else in slavery. So you already have your holidays. If you identify as a white American, you've got plenty of holidays. You have plenty of cultural representation. So you're complaining about the one day that other people get when you have all the rest of the days. This is part 2 of this ridiculous ladies' ramble. If we had a white pride day, you'd call us racist. That's because white is a category that only existed in the context of transatlantic slavery. You weren't white in Europe. You're British, you're French, you're Italian, you're Spanish, Portuguese. You're not white. You're only white in the context of coming to America and merging the races to strengthen the validity of the white supremacist caste system of slavery. That's why there's no white pride day, because we don't glorify slavery. If you want to have an Irish pride day, if you have Irish ancestors, you go on Ancestry.com. I did it. It's pretty fun, quick and easy. I think they give you 2 weeks free. Awesome site. They're not even paying me. If they want to pay me, you fucking hit me up. You go back, you find out who your ancestors were. I found out I'm mostly Irish. I have a number of servants, ancestors who came here in the 1600s as indentured servants. They were British. I have a number of German ancestors from the German Reformation period when all the Mennonites came over in the 1800s. I mean, that's pretty much my background. None of them owned slaves. None of them, as far as I can tell, were bloodthirsty colonizers. I'm sure more than one of them killed a native. That's just the time, That's the reality of this country. But I look at that and I say, okay, well, here's the things that I can have pride in. I come from a stock of German religious separatists who really believed in Jesus Christ and thought modern society was evil. Well, I'm very proud of that. I mean, that's a lot of my religious beliefs. I come from working class Irish people who came here either as servants or to flee the potato famine and British colonization. Again, lines up with my values. I'm very proud of that. I don't support something like St. Patrick's Day, which is theoretically a day of visibility for Irish people, because it's racist. Or ethnicist, culturalist, whatever you want to say. I mean, it's a day where people drink Irish car bombs to celebrate the Irish culture. I mean, if that's not insensitive, I don't know what is, folks. We have a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Black Chamber of Commerce, then we just have the plain Chamber of Commerce. Exactly. Because the Chamber of Commerce is not supposed to be just for white people. But unfortunately, in eras where black people weren't allowed to have property, it definitely wasn't the Black Chamber of Commerce. So these are programs to help people get ahead in a society that put them behind. Now, the thing is, what I think a lot of these people are probably resentful of is that there's no support for poor white people. And that's true. I'm going to do a video probably in the next week that I've been thinking about white guy problems. Because one of the main ways that these hate groups are recruiting people is to say, like, hey, you're a poor white, you got left behind. Now, obviously, it's plainly not true. I mean, if voting rights are being suppressed for black people, they're not doing it on racial lines. They're not turning black people away at the polls. They're closing poll stations in poor areas. That's why you're getting fucked as a poor white person. You're getting savaged by your government, by your economics, and you're getting savaged culturally because you're being asked to take responsibility for this system of racism that you don't feel like you should take responsibility for, right? So these are people who they genuinely feel in their heart of hearts like they're the lowest class of society. Even though historically, objectively, we know that's nonsense, but they feel that way. 60 openly proclaimed black colleges. Again, that's because segregation existed. Those colleges were open when black people could not go to school with white people. So, I just can't. I can't. At this last point, if we march for our race and rights, you'd call us racist. That's because the rights that you are upholding are the rights to be racist. If you want human rights and human dignity and civil rights, you go out in the street with everybody else and you chant Black Lives Matter. Because when black people get free, you're free too. I promise you that. So this idea that, if you want human rights, you want civil rights, you go and you be a part of movements for black people's lives and justice for black lives. This is not an oversell. I mean, this is real. But it relies on a relationship with you having a relationship with the truth. Because the truth is, justice for one person is justice for the planet. Because justice, true justice, is universal. To do justice to a person who was a victim of a hate crime is to help to prevent future crimes like that from taking place. That's justice. And so, as we stand up for the rights of black people, as we stand up for the rights of people to have economic justice, social justice, to have a more kind, equitable society, we do that by standing up for the least of these. As I said in previous videos, the least of these you do unto me. Meaning, as you stand up for black people, you are standing up for your faith in Christ. You're standing up for your faith as a person who believes in justice, equality, kindness. And so the act of standing up in solidarity with someone, regardless of their race, if they're in an unfortunate circumstance, is the act of standing up for justice and the act of standing up for yourself and the truth. This is very important. It's critically important. Black Lives Matter is not a black supremacy group. It is a black advocacy group. If we say it's a shame that Israel is killing Palestinians and taking them off their land, that is not a pro-Palestinian, Palestinian separatist, Palestinian supremacist argument. That is saying the absence of justice is evident in the unfairness of the acts. In the Bible, it says, "You will know them by their fruit." This is how people are advised to look out for false prophets. You'll know them by their fruit. I wish I could tell you more specifically how to look for bad fruit. I will, as time goes along, be giving you more toolkits, more information to look for bad faith, to look for bad people and bad intentions. But it is not a perfect process. It's something that you have to develop the capacity inside yourself to see in people. And you have to be willing to be honest with yourself about people's intentions and not just naively see things for the best. Because, these women who posted these racist rants that we looked at, they fully believe in the underlying argument that they're making, which is that we should stop all of this saying Black Lives Matter, struggling for civil rights, struggling for justice stuff, because it's unfair to them, right? That justice for other people is unfair to the unjust person. And that argument is true, but it's complete bad faith. It's true in the relative reality. It's completely false underneath. And we live in a world of these superficial truths covering deep lies. I am not going to be too pessimistic about this because I have faith. I have faith that the world is going to improve and that people will take this seriously and try to grapple with being a better person, being a more kind and moral person, and telling the truth. And, not spreading these disingenuous, racist lies. I want to look at a couple of things that are kind of more context to this idea. The first one is to talk about this young man, Maurice Gordon, rest in power. People may not have heard about him. He was killed 3 days after George Floyd was killed. And so the world was kind of wrestling with the riots that were happening in Minneapolis. And it went mostly unmentioned that this man was killed in New Jersey. He ran out of gas. I don't know if he or someone else called roadside assistance, but roadside assistance was called. It's standard for a cop to show up to roadside assistance. Usually you're the first responder. And I don't know what happened. I mean, I haven't seen any body cam footage. What was described by the officer was that he had placed Mr. Gordon into handcuffs and put him in the back of his car for his own safety, having not committed a crime and having not done anything wrong. This agitated Mr. Gordon, who wanted to get out of the car and didn't want to be handcuffed. He hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't being detained. He had run out of gas. And so he was insisting in getting out of the car. The cop said he was being agitated. And eventually it escalated to the point where the police officer shot him multiple times. So this is the perfect example of why I don't ever give anyone any credibility on the criminal argument. Ever. None. None. This is a white supremacist hand symbol, by the way. That's not accidental, because only fucking white supremacists believe that criminal bullshit. And I give it no credibility. None. Because people like Maurice Gordon did nothing wrong. They were killed by the police anyway. And if the same crowd, they will never address cases like this. They will always address the criminal. The second that they can find something in your record that proves that you're an immoral person, they're all over it. But that's why nobody mentioned this guy. Because he didn't fit the narrative. He was just a black guy killed by police. Much like this Elijah McClain young man, who also didn't do anything wrong. No one wanted to talk about him either. But they all loved to talk about George Floyd, because he was a bad guy and he deserved it. But these two gentlemen didn't deserve it. And the more you justify abject police brutality, disgusting racism, the more you are going to find yourself in a position where you're saying it's justified that the police killed this bright young man who is a recent immigrant to this country from Britain, who had done nothing wrong, simply because he was black on a Tuesday. Is that the world you want to live in, folks? Is that the world you want to live in? And the other thing that's mind-blowing about all of the examples that we just saw, from Candace to both of the racist white ladies, is, well, why do they keep saying racism isn't real when we see it is. I mean, somebody please explain to me without racism how this man dies. Anybody? Anybody got any ideas? How did he even end up in the back of the squad car being detained for having run out of gas? How does that even happen? Even if just that first part happened to a white person, ACLU would probably be called. You know what I mean? That cop violated his civil rights in multiple ways and shot him when he was resisting it. That's a police state, folks. That's not law and order. That's not justice. So, in all of these cases, right, we're seeing people who, for whatever reason, they say they're not racist. They say they're not. But yet, their behavior holds up racism. Maybe they're not going out committing hate crimes. And that's what they use as their justification that they're not racist. All right. This is a letter that MLK wrote back in the civil rights movement. This should be mandatory reading for all people. And so we're going to look at it right now in the context of this bad faith argument. Because he makes an argument here that I think a lot of people need to grapple with. All right. So, as you saw, this is about halfway down. It's a rather lengthy letter. And in the first part of the letter, he addresses some things. And we're going to come back and we're going to look at that first part of the letter in a later video when we talk about rioting. Because in that first part of the letter, he talks about the idea of being an outside agitator and why that's false. And why movements for justice will not stop. So the logic of telling people that it's wrong isn't gonna change anything. In this part of the letter, though, he lays out what he calls a regrettable conclusion. So this is his. Oh, screwed that up a little bit. This is his regrettable conclusion. All right. One more. I must confess that over the past few years I have been greatly disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tensions, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, so I agree your life matters, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, meaning I don't want you to say Black Lives Matter and go on and protest about it. I agree that you matter. I just want you to not do anything about it. Who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom. Who lives by the mythical concept of time and constantly advises to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Martin Luther King wasn't a liar, folks. He had plenty of time to think about what he was writing in this letter. He was sitting in jail when he did it. he thought about this. This is what he believed. That people who don't stand up for justice and would rather let the status quo go on are actually the people who are the problem. Because if they actually believed that Black Lives Matter and that we should have a just society, and they helped us do that, we would get it done. It's that they obstruct. It's that they prevent social justice from actually occurring in order to maintain the status quo. So a little bit further down, oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. Something within the American Negro reminded him of his birthright of freedom, and something without has reminded him that it can be gained. That's why we're living what we're living in. Because these are people who have been oppressed. Our society has not treated people well. It's not listening to them. And now they've taken to the streets to do something about it. Because they've seen the effects. They've seen that you can go out and get change on your own by standing up for yourself. They've seen that now. It means this is not going away. Consciously or unconsciously, he has been caught up in the zeitgeist and moving with a sense of great urgency towards the promised land of racial justice. That's true. That is good faith. When you've seen the truth, when you know racism is appalling, you know justice for one is justice for all. You know that. And so you stand up for it. You stand up for that because you stand up for yourself. And you stand up for the truth and for justice. And when that starts to happen, the more people who do that, the more powerful that gets. God said the faith of a mustard seed could move a mountain. What more could you do if you believed? What more could we do if we believed? Abolish racism? Abolish militarism? Abolish the prison industrial complex, aka legal slavery? Abolish political violence, suppression? Abolish obstructionism in the Congress so that changes can actually be made? Abolish corporate donations? Hell, abolish corporations, full stop. Make everything in this country small, locally owned, small businesses. We can do that. We can make it so that every person in this house, when they turn 18, they're given housing. Maybe that's a small house or a small apartment until you make a family and you have to buy something for yourself to expand. But we could end homelessness. We could end world hunger. We could make a program that mandates every person keep a garden in their backyard and share crops with each other. So that we literally begin to produce wealth out of the grounds again. So that we don't have to pay for food again, like it was intended by nature. We could do that. What more could we do if we really believed change was possible? Martin Luther King said, quoting the Bible, "Let justice roll on like a mighty river." And that is what will happen. This is not going to stop with police brutality. It's not going to stop with pulling down idolatrous statues of slave owners. No. You see, the false Christians, they did themselves a disservice. They told us to read the Bible. They told us this country was a shining and just city on the hill. It is God's will to make it good. And now we came to do that. And it turns out that's not what they wanted. They didn't want us to be free. They didn't want us to do good. They wanted us to be in chains and to do what they wanted, to serve their God, which is profit and money and power. We don't serve that God. We've come to rectify the situation and to put God back in its position on all those pedestals. which means tearing down the idols. We've come to put God first in our homes again, which means getting rid of the budget as the highest piece of paper in the household. We've come to do God's work in the courts, which means purging the courts of those who refuse to do God's will and to uphold God's justice. And that's just the beginning of it, folks. It will roll on like a mighty river. The second that people get organized and take political power for themselves and stop allowing the propaganda machine to tell you open lies that you could confirm with your own eyes are not true if you only bothered to use them. The second we do that, progress will come. It'll come quicker than, as Buddhists would say, quicker than a ship exiting a harbor with its sails down. Full steam ahead, as we would say in America. It won't stop. It won't. It hasn't stopped yet. I mean, from the abolitionist movement to the resistance against the KKK to the civil rights movement to the very present day and Black Lives Matter, there have been people, white, black, Jewish, Mexican, Arab, what have you, standing up for the rights of people to not be enslaved. Standing up for the rights of all free individuals to be free and equal under God. And that process is not stopping. This is a big system. It was a global, worldwide system of evil and domination. And it has been weakened. Don't get that twisted. It has been weakened. And it is now more aware than ever of its own mortality. That's why it has gotten desperate. It's begun to send antichrists out into the world to speak lies that they know are lies. That's the system we live in now, folks. Paid bad actors and unintentional evil-minded racists going out speaking ill on man, on God, on justice, on truth, because either in their hearts they don't want to change from an evil system, or in their wallets they are convinced not to change an evil system. That's bad faith. Good faith is you go and you preach the gospel. You know what the gospel is? Power to the people. Black Lives Matter. Jesus is returning to this planet to right the wrongs. That's the gospel. You go out and you tell every person that. Black Lives Matter. God is coming back to prove it. Go out and you tell people. You go out and you stand up for what's right. You find the other people who are like you and you pool your resources and help the poor. Whether that's pool your resources and overhaul the political system with your political donations, or pool your resources and give directly to the poor and recruit the poor. That is how Jesus did it. His ministry started with criminals and lepers and prostitutes and workers and freed slaves. And he told all of them in turn, the meek will inherit the earth. Meaning the people who are capable of inflicting damage. We could tear this whole country down, and we won't. We will restrain ourselves because we're going to keep the good and purge the bad. That's meek. Jesus said meek will inherit the earth. That means when we go out and we take our birthright of freedom, we go out in the streets and we demand justice and equality. Demand it. That's doing God's work. And that will inherit the world. That will enshrine a new way of being for the people of this planet. But that starts in abandoning bad faith. Abandoning false truth. False Christianity. Tepid Christianity. Lies about racism, lies about the coronavirus, which if you're a Christian and you think for a second God wouldn't send a plague to punish selfish people, you didn't read the book. Who are the people most at risk to get coronavirus? It's the people too selfish to wear the goddamn mask. Too selfish to make a sacrifice, a small sacrifice for other people. Those are the people who are going to get it more frequently than others. And if you didn't think that a system like that proves that the world is an equilibrium system and it is paying attention, then you are not paying attention. Okay? This is no accident, folks. This is the worst year that this country's seen in modern history. A plague. Our economic system is collapsing. Racism has returned full bore. People are in the streets because politics is failing. I mean, folks, if you never thought what you might do in some sort of international crisis, if you ever wondered what you would do during the Civil War or during Nazi Germany, look at yourself. Because you're doing it right now. Who are you in this moment? Are you standing up for justice? Are you being true? Are you being honest with yourself? Do you have good faith or are you bad faith? Are you a real Christian or are you a false Christian? Because I hate to tell you, Jesus said himself, by the end there would be 144,000 real believers. And the vast overwhelming majority of Christianity would be false believers that he would not acknowledge. That's not my opinion, folks. That's not my opinion. I'm just a religious person. You gotta ask yourself, man. You gotta really ask yourself, like, are we prepared as a country? If it really does turn out that this is the critical moment, are you prepared? Are you prepared for things to get worse? Are you prepared to stand up for what you believe in the face of overwhelming adversity? Because, again, the Bible is very clear. To be a Christian means to be oppressed. It means to be put upon. Because you, as a Christian, if you are doing your job properly, means you are agitating the wealthy. Christ died to bring his example to earth. He spent the time that he had educating the poor and whipping bankers out of temple courtyards. What kind of guy you think he was? You think he was all love and light? No. Jesus had good faith. He was going to do whatever he had to make sure that the world was a better place. Can you say that about yourself? Or are you one of the Christians who Paul described as lukewarm? Who just wants to, go to work, worship mammon for 40 hours a week, come home, beat your kids, go to church on Sundays? Is that you? You know people like that? I do. Look, the reckoning's coming, folks. If you have any real belief in truth, any real religious belief at all, you have to believe that it's coming back. And if it comes back, the Bible says it will return like a thief in the night. It's not going to tell you when it's coming. It's going to wait until the most people aren't paying attention. It's going to sneak back. And on that day, are you going to be on the right side? Are you going to be on the right side of history? Are you going to be on the side of justice, equality, truth, peace, goodness, understanding? Or are you going to be on the side of obstructionism and batshit crazy conspiracy theories, denying racism, denying reality, denying climate change, the damage we're doing to this planet and the damage we're doing to each other? You want to go down in denial? Okay. You go for it. You let me know how that works out for you. Me, I'm going down aware. Whether I'm right about this being the moment where truth wins, I don't care. Because I got no other choice. I've already looked in myself. I've made the determination that I can live based on selfish values or I can live based on universal values. I tried the selfish values for a while. It didn't work. It made me a bad person. Just like it's making you a bad person if you're out there and you're being selfish. You're not considering other people. You're not being respectful of other people. You're not trying to educate yourself. You're not trying to empathize. You're a bad person. Just because you don't commit outright acts of violence and hatred does not make you good. It does not make you an anti-racist. I mean, Martin said it himself. You know, go read this letter from a Birmingham jail. Read it for yourself. Don't let me read it to you. Go educate yourself. And when you finish this and you come back and you tell me if you meet his standards, which are not even as high as Jesus' standards, you tell me if you still feel like a real Christian after that letter. You tell me if you still feel like you've been acting in good faith this whole time by saying, well, I just want law and order and justice, and black people can just go home and stop chanting. You think that was the right way? Do you think that was true? If you do, God help you. God help you. I think that's it for today. Just got to about an hour. In the next couple of days, there will be more. This is the end of this series. You know, I wanted to show you a couple of examples of bad faith, and then give you an example of why good faith is important and what could possibly be accomplished from good faith. I don't know. I don't know what the next couple of videos are going to bring. I'll put the splash screen up on the screen here at the end. It's got the email address on it. So if you've watched this and you say, man, this guy was not a total boring toad, maybe I want to hear him explain something else, send me an email to that email. I'll do my best to get something that helps you out. All right. Till next time.